what I'm going to go through is a very simple discussion on what SDGs mean, not in terms of how they were framed and so on, but SDGs and their importance in the post-COVID, post-corona world, and how that impacts all of us in the higher education sector. That is what I'm going to talk about. That what is going to be, what are the problems that we see, what are the challenges that we will face as far as going approaching the SDGs is concerned, and how we in the higher education sector are going to tackle these issues. So what talking about, the first question is what are our challenges to? Why are we discussing this issue in today's forum? How is how are the SDGs and the pursuit of those SDGs uh, impacting us today in the social arena, especially after the epidemic? That is the question that we are asking. Now, there can be several answers to this question. My answer, and the answer that I'm proposing today to all of you to think about, the big challenge to society after what has happened in the last 3 months is a challenge on at three levels. And this is my first point that I want to introduce to all of you. Having seen the literature on the economic impact and the social impact of COVID-19 and Corona, what I propose is that there are three aspects that are very critical, and these three aspects are the important socio-economic impact that we are seeing that is going to matter to our reaching our SDGs. What are these three? The three issues that we are talking about are poverty, hunger, and unemployment. As I said, there can be others. There are others. For example, education is a serious issue. But I am not talking about education to people here in this meeting because you understand that issue much better than anyone else. I am talking about the three major issues of poverty, hunger, and unemployment. Let's see quickly where they fit in. You know these 17 goals at SDG. Why I wanted to show you this is that the first point of universality is very important in the post-corona period, because for the first time in the world history, do we have a problem that is absolutely universal. Out of the 200 odd countries, we have 190 countries that have been affected by this virus. The second is that they are integrated goals, the three that I talked about. We need, this transformation issue again is something that we all know about. So the first goal is poverty, and that is why I am talking about the impact on SDGs of this virus. It is directly impacting SDG 1. How is it impacting SDG 1? You see, in the last 20 years, we have seen an acute fall in the level of poverty in India. In the last 25 years, we have seen more than 300 million people coming out of poverty. So poverty, which used to be nearly 40% of the population, is now down to about 15%, 18%, some say 20%. So there has been such huge reduction in poverty in the last so many years. However, in the last 3 months, this impact has been so high that we are again seeing an increase in poverty. The estimate is that at least 100 million people now will go back into poverty because of what has happened due to coronavirus. So therefore, therefore, the first major social impact of the post-corona economy is that poverty seems to have, or poverty definitely has increased. The second SDG, again the second, and this is the second point, and that is the important issue. That what has happened is that on the hunger issue, we are already facing a problem. For example, what do I mean by that? That if you look at the global hunger index, you will find that even before corona was facing a serious problem. The numbers are that about 100 million people in India, 10 crore people in India every day sleep hungry. That's a large number, and that is a very sad aspect of our development path. That even after so many years, 100 million people went hungry in December 2019. But the tragedy is that in the last 4 months, we have added people to this number that is hungry. The estimate is that about 50% of people in India now are eating less. 50%. But the more difficult or the more tragic number is that at least 140 million people now are suffering from hunger. Hunger is a very difficult problem. Hunger is a very serious problem. Most of us on this webinar do not know what hunger is. Fasting for a day or fasting for a month is another thing altogether. That does give us some idea. But hungry people, or acute hunger, is when you haven't eaten for 5 or 6 days and you don't know whether you are going to and when you are going to get your next meal. That is acute hunger, and that is the kind of hunger today that about 140 million people in India suffer. That number has gone up by at least 40 million. So SDG 1 is a huge problem because we now have new poor people, or people who had exited poverty have joined poverty back. And the second point is an important point because now we have added so many more million people who are hungry. The whole virus issue is about its impact on health, how it is going to make so many people unhealthy and unwell. This is the point that you are addressing, that we have to ensure inclusive and quality education. What has been the impact of corona on education? The big impact is that all schools are closed down, and some few students now are going to get educated online. The best estimate we have is that 10% of our students can afford to go online, which means that while we will provide quality education online, which in itself is questionable, it will not be inclusive. It will not include 90% of our students. That is the issue as far as education is concerned. SDG 5 is an important SDG. And in the context of corona, what I have to tell you is that all the 3 points that I made, that poverty is going up, hunger is going up, and unemployment is going up, we will find that all these three impact women disproportionately larger. So if there is poverty is going up more among women than among men. If there is hunger going up, then more women are going hungry compared to men. Unemployment has gone up, it is women who have lost jobs more than men. So on all three issues, the impact on gender equality has been very, very significant. Access to water and sanitation continues to be an important goal. We will not talk about it now. Energy, yes, it is critical, and the only point I must tell you here is that one of the big fallouts of COVID has been that the demand for electricity has come down. It is in a country like ours, when the demand for electricity comes down, then it is a serious issue. And that is what has happened in the last. sustainable economic growth, employment, decent work for all. This SDG has become so much more difficult to meet now. We already had a huge problem because of Corona. Now everybody knows that 90% of our labor does not work in decent work conditions. It is what is known as unorganized labor or informal labor. And instead of that going up, now it is coming down. So we are going to have a big problem as far as SDG number 8 is concerned. Infrastructure issue is going to be a major issue in the next few months, because what has happened is that most of our infrastructure projects are now held up. They will become more expensive. They will not find it easy to complete. Our airports, our metro lines, our roads, all those are becoming very difficult to foster. Inequality after COVID, you can understand, will only increase even among countries and within countries. What has been exposed is SDG number 11. If you see what has happened with COVID, the COVID attack has been entirely a city based attack. It is the cities that have got affected. And if you see the whole world, it's a very strange virus that we are seeing, which is attacking, which is causing damage, more damage to the bigger city. Could you have ever imagined, even as late as January this year, that we will have an issue wherein the big cities of the world, the biggest cities of the world will close down? New York, London, Tokyo, Beijing, Bombay, Delhi. It is these big cities of the world that have been exposed with this virus. Sustainable consumption and production patterns is a standard SDG. We will not discuss it today. It's an important issue but not relevant to our conversation today. Sustainability, use of oceans, etc. The same thing. Desertification, degradation, forests, hugely important. This is a huge issue for us. If you saw how we behaved with our migrant labor, the kind of injustice that was done to them, the kind of exclusion that we showed to them. 100 million people left in the lurch, don't know what to do, walking back home. This period after March 22nd, when we saw these thousands and lakhs of people stranded in our society, was a picture that I don't think many of us ever thought we will see, and almost none of us is going to forget that when we see people walking home, girls cycling 1,000 kilometers, carrying their small children, dying on the way. This was possibly the biggest debacle that we saw in the last 4 months, as far as our social issues are concerned, and certainly as far as our goals are concerned. This is, you will see how important this is, that if we want, what COVID has shown to us, that unless we all work on this together, we are not going to solve the problem. This is a brilliant example of why SDG 17 is so important. That if we are going to fight this virus, every country in the world has to work together to develop a vaccine. If one country develops a vaccine, it will have to ensure that the vaccines are available to every other country. If one country develops a cure, that cure will have to be shared with everybody. We have to ensure that we develop a very strong partnership that will help us solve the problem. So the SDG goal 17 has never been as important as it is today. Right? Each goal is important, but in the post-COVID world, the goals that I am talking about are the three of poverty, hunger, and unemployment. And my first point is that of poverty. How is poverty important? And why is poverty important to all of you in higher education? One of the aspects about poverty, or the aspects about understanding poverty, is, and all of you teachers will know what I mean, how do you explain poverty to your student? What is poverty? If your teacher is teaching economics, sociology, anthropology, political science, how will you explain poverty? What does poverty mean? And what does poverty mean in today's context? Does poverty mean the inability to consume 2200 calories a day? Does poverty mean lack of access to education? Now, does poverty mean lack of access to hospitals? What is poverty? In today's context, in the context of SDG, that SDG goal number one is so important for all of us to understand that if in the 21st century we will have a billion people who suffer from poverty, in India if we have nearly 280 million people who suffer from poverty, that is such a shame. But to be able to tackle poverty, we have to understand poverty and we have to explain to our students what poverty is. So my first recommendation to everybody in higher education is to make students aware of poverty. You see, the problem today is that because we have built such nice cities, such beautiful insulated urban spaces, that our children don't get to see poverty at all. And unless children see poverty, they will not understand. I teach my students, and those students can't imagine that there can be people in the world or in the country who don't have a refrigerator at home. For them, poverty means maybe there is no car. What they don't understand is that poverty means that you don't have more than one pair of clothes. Sometimes not even that. Try and build some field component in all your classes. Uh, Ensure that your students go out and write a report and do some internship on poverty. What I normally do is I take my students in my economics class to go out to some poor neighborhood and study eating patterns, study consumption patterns there. Then they begin to understand that they come back and say, sir, this is the first time we realize that 20 rupees is a lot of money for a lot of people. So that's my first recommendation to all of you. That if higher education must meet the SDG demands, it must explain to students what poverty means actually in real terms. The second point, second point I told you is about hunger. As just to repeat, I said that we have added at least 40 million number of people who are hungry in India, who go without food every day. What is the what are the various aspects of hunger and why is hunger such an important issue? Let me just give you one indication to explain why I am underlining the importance of SDG on hunger. You see, of these hungry people, these 140 million hungry people in India, the number is slightly more, but at least the 140 million that the Global Hunger Index says India has, these 140 million people who are going hungry, of them, at least 10%, 13 million are poor, hungry, pregnant women. See, we have 23 million women who are pregnant today. And at any point in time, about 23, 24 million pregnancies happen in India. Out of that, at least 13 million mothers are going hungry. Hunger itself is a big problem. But when a pregnant woman is going hungry, then it means that nutrition imprint on the child is going to stay forever, for a lifetime. So therefore, the big problem that we are facing right now, something that we are not discussing at all, none of us is talking about it, and that is that these 12, 13 hungry pregnant women will produce 12, 13 malnutrition, 13 million children. The last time this happened was is what is known as the Dutch famine. For those of you who haven't heard of this, the Dutch famine happened immediately after the Second World War. And this was very widely studied. That's why it's a very good example. After the Dutch famine, there was a long study done on what that famine did to the Dutch women at that time. What it did was that a lot of Dutch women who were pregnant were hungry for about 7, 8 months. Because of that hunger, the Dutch population remained malnutrition. For several decades, those children suffered because of that one Dutch famine for several decades. That nutrition imprint can never be deleted. Same thing is happening today. That we are ignoring the fact that 13 million of our women who are going hungry because we have withdrawn Asha workers, we have withdrawn Anganwadis, we are not providing midday meal schemes. These hungry women are going to produce malnutrition children, and this problem, even after COVID, will stay for a long, long time. Our SDG challenge is going to be that much bigger a challenge because of our ignoring of hunger. The third point I made was unemployment. And you saw how SDGs speak so much about the importance of decent work. First point on unemployment, we have at least nearly 120 million people who lost their jobs in the last 3 months. Just in the last 3 months. This is on top of the fact that in December we already had record unemployment. You see, one thing I want to tell you, which I did not say in the beginning itself. Our India's problem did not start with COVID. India's problem starts in 2016. From 2016 onwards, our economy is going down by the quarter. December 2019, Arvind Subramanian, our chief economic advisor then, said that India's economy is entering an ICU. At that time we never thought that the word ICU will become so popular. Intensive care unit. He said that the Indian economy is going downhill every day and is entering the ICU. His point was that India's economy is in a very bad shape. This is much before COVID. We had record unemployment. We had never had that level of unemployment in the last 45 years. We had our economic growth rate was going down every quarter from 8%, we were down to 4.5%. Tax collection was coming down, and therefore the tax to GDP ratio was down at its lowest. In fact, yesterday's report is that our tax to GDP ratio for the first time has gone below 10%. 10% of GDP. So we were already in a very bad shape. And what has happened in the last 3 years is made it very, very much worse. Particularly the unemployment. Unemployment situation. I noticed somebody has asked this question on what's the reason for the impact on the economy. We will talk a little bit about that. But the fact is that our economy was already in a very bad shape in December, and now it is in tatters. And therefore, the impact on unemployment is going to be really huge. Almost everybody, except for those of us who work in the government, have lost our jobs. So whatever I said so far, I'm telling you, I made a simple point, and that first point I made was that the impact of the COVID epidemic has been on three areas: poverty, hunger, and unemployment. The second point I made was that these three are central to the issue of reaching SDG goals. The third point I'm making is that all these three are important for higher education to tackle. Higher education must make our students aware of what poverty is. Higher education must explain and highlight the importance of hunger and how hunger is going to impact future generations. And higher education must ensure that what we teach allows our children to get employed later on. Those are the three points that I made so far. The fourth point that I'm making, and this is the last point, is, and again this is where higher education becomes important, because we in higher education shape our children's thinking, and therefore shape policy thinking. What has been the state response? How has the government responded to all this? See, whenever there is a big disaster, and a disaster can be an epidemic, it can be an earthquake, it can be flood, it can be war. Whenever there is a big disaster, there is bound to be crisis that will follow. This crisis is not new. It happened after the Spanish flu, after World War II, China War. Our economy, for example, is going down. I said it will go in the negative, but the fact is that it will go in the negative. Only four times it has happened in Indian history: 1956-57, 1970, 1965, 1979, and 1990. Only four times we have seen a contraction in the economy. So, if if we are going to see that contraction in the economy again, and we don't know how much it will contract by, the question is that what will be the state response? In this situation, how does the state react? There are two ways in which a government can react to any crisis. One way is the benevolent, the generous way. And that benevolent, generous way was that look, all of you 200 million people who are losing their jobs, we know that you have a problem. Don't worry, for the next 3 months, we are going to feed you three times a day. We are going to keep you safe. We are going to open up all the schools and colleges that have been closed down, all marriage halls and hotels that have been closed down, and we will keep you there and feed you. Don't get exposed to the virus, don't die. The other extreme response is where the state says that we can't do anything. You have to take care of yourself. The economy has to recover, so everybody has to go back to work. Those are the two different kinds of responses. Unfortunately, most governments today responded in the latter fashion. Except countries like New Zealand, etc. The other countries said we can't be doing too much. So some countries did. The African countries did better. The poorer countries actually did better. So the point I'm making is that we need to understand what kind of state response is important. Today's state response of saying that it should open up at a time when India's numbers are going up relentlessly, to my mind, is a very, very wrong decision. We made a mistake. We should have closed down on March 1st. We closed down on March 22nd. March 1st, we had barely 20 cases. By delaying it for 20 days, we just allowed all the virus to come in. Now, when our number is going up relentlessly, it is going up. It's going up by 10,000 cases every day. We are opening up. Why? Because we cannot feed people. It is very, very small-minded. Therefore, we should allow them to go out every day. I think that was a mistake, and this is what I want to convey to you. But the point is not my opinion. The point I want to convey to all of you who are in charge of higher education is that we must get our students to start thinking of it. Because you see, it is our students who are going to solve the problems for tomorrow. Those of us who have gone old now, we are only looking at problems, and we continue to look at problems and keep shouting that such a problem exists and this problem exists and that problem exists. It is our students who are going to find solutions. To be able to find solutions, they should be aware, they should be sensitive. And that is why it is so important, and that is why I was so happy when MCR, HRDI and the Reddy College decided to do this program on ST, because this aspect is an aspect that people have missed out on. So I will conclude here by saying that my plea to all of you in higher education is to ensure that our students understand what internationalism means in fighting a disease. How we all can come together to be able to make the world a better. To do that, our college students, our university students must understand poverty, must understand hunger, and must understand the pains of unemployment. As someone just pointed out in the chat window, we have to create job givers among us. We have to create those kind of people who will understand what poverty means and how to tackle that poverty. That is our goal. That is our goal as teachers. Our role should be to not only produce very highly skilled doctors and engineers and so on, but also extremely sensitive, sensitive young men and women is what we need in a country like ours. I will stop here. Thank you very much for having listened to me for so long. And what I will now do is open the floor up very quickly for some questions. Rukhaya is asking, is the reduction in poverty on paper or is it really happening? Rukhaya, the data is very clear on this, and I can say with confidence that the reduction in poverty over the last 30 years has been real. We still have very poor people in the country, very poor people. And I can tell you that our poor people are poorer than those who are really poor, that bottom 130 million people in India are the poorest in the world. There is no country, even in Africa, which has more poor people than we do. But the total number has come down. The total number has come down very significantly. All the improvements in our economic development has seen to it that a large number of people have emerged out of poverty. The point I am making today is that because of this 3 months and what is going to happen in the next 6 months, a lot of people who had gone out of poverty are now going to come back into the poverty. That is a very serious issue, and that is an issue that we must all worry about. Um, then, what is the second? What might what might be the reasons for downfall in the economy? Several people have pointed out several reasons. Arvind Subramaniam, for example, points out that the downfall in the economy starts immediately after demonetization. Raghuram Rajan points out that after demonetization, it was the manner in which GST was imposed that led to the downfall in the economy. A third reason that is given is because of external factors, that because of trouble in the United States and in the European Union, exports started falling, and therefore India's economy started falling down. Sujata's question is our economy alone? Good question, Sujata. The whole world is facing a serious problem, but India's problem is that India's economy has been falling for the last 3 years. The world economy is suffering now. It will suffer. But among most of these countries that have got affected by corona, most of those countries, US, China, UK, Spain, Italy, they have so much of reserves. They are so rich that for them, 10% of GDP being spent does not really matter. But for India, it is going to be a serious issue. It is going to impact our fiscal deficits, going to involve increase our dependence on external debt, then we are going to face a bigger problem than the other countries. One thing that I did not talk about, one interesting aspect, just think about it, that this virus is a strange virus. Unlike all other viruses earlier, this has only and disproportionately impacted the rich countries. Look at the countries that are affected by this virus. United States, Russia, UK, Germany, Japan, China, all the big rich countries of the world. You don't hear about Swaziland and about Rhodesia, Zimbabwe, or Papua New Guinea. The only poor country in the top 10 is India. So it's a very weird fight. Of course, in the rich countries, it is the poor who are dying and the poor who are suffering. But this is a problem that has affected the rich countries. Also, look at the cities. Could you have ever imagined even 6 months ago that you will think of a situation in history when the big cities of the world will be shut down completely? London, Tokyo, Bombay, Delhi, shut down. Could we have even imagined this even in January? Look at India's case. Which are the states that are doing badly? The worst states as far as COVID is concerned. Tamil Nadu, the three richest states, and Punjab, the four richest states. Cities that are doing badly, Bombay, Delhi, Ahmedabad. So this is a very strange virus, and it is going to impact various economies. But the rich economies are it is like some child falling ill in a very rich house. versus a child falling in a poor house. In the rich house, the child will fall, child will suffer the same consequences. The family will not suffer. So in the poor house, everything will be for sale. As in our cases, yes, our job is to produce job creators. Yes and no, in the sense that we also need a lot of job seekers. We need, for example, right now we find that because, and we have to take this responsibility, that we in the higher education sector have failed to create enough doctors in the country. Today we find that the big problem in Bombay is not so much the lack of beds, it is the lack of nurses. Why were we not able to create, despite such a huge higher education sector, why are we not able to create enough doctors in the country today, enough nurses in the country? So, those are the conditions. Sujata says India considerably took care of its subjects. Uh, yes, Sujata, yes and no. That, if we had taken care of everybody, then we would not have had people dying on the road, people suffering of hunger. We should have taken better care. Uh, as everybody will say, you can always say that we can do better. But in this case, those news items that all of us read and saw of people dying while walking back home, of people suffering from hunger, these are visuals that we should not have allowed to happen. But yeah, you're right. We did do quite a bit. Some states did better than the other states. For example, Kerala. There is no doubt about it that Kerala did very very well and continues to do very well. So that is right. But then Telangana has not been bad at all. Though you can see around people suffering. But yes, some state governments did do better than the other state governments. Kavuri with COVID has the poverty increased? Definitely. Yes, it has increased. I can tell you that. We can calculate the numbers later on, but we have made at least 50 million people to the poor in the last 3 months, and I am afraid that number can go up to 100 million in the next. Smita, would reverse migration increase unemployment? Yes, our rural countryside is not capable of absorbing more people. It already is overpopulated. It already has high disguised unemployment and seasonal unemployment. So the number of people who have gone back to villages will only increase the supply of labor, and while the demand is already going down. So therefore, the consequent poverty, yes, the poverty will go up because the employment will increase. Even in urban areas, this is directly important to all of us in higher education. Our students who are going to graduate this year or next year are going to find huge problems getting jobs. Survey after survey has shown that this year no corporate sector is willing to hire. In fact, the study even today, which says that only 5% have said that they will hire this year. Rest of them are busy uh, retrenching youngsters. So we have a problem as far as unemployment is concerned. Ram Karthik, GST has brought in transparency in taxation. Absolutely right. In fact, most of us who have worked on GST, I worked on GST for the last 15 years, have been arguing that GST is possibly the biggest reform that we have seen in this 21st century. However, the problem is that the GST, as several people have pointed out, was implemented very shortly. In the absence of a GST system or the GST mechanism, you have small and medium enterprises suffering tremendously because of huge delays in clearing their due of the. And those of you who teach economics will understand what I'm saying, that GST was supposed to be a single tax rate. We moved up big time by having five different tax rates, and a 28% tax rate is a ridiculous tax. Nobody pays it. 18% itself is very high. So while GST, that of bringing in one goods and services tax across the country, is a superb idea. The best idea that we could think of, it was done very, very shoddily, and that is why you found several MSMEs dying out because after the GST and the GST collections constantly going down. even last year. Not this year, GST collections will go down even further, but that is because of Corona. 2018-19 reduction, gross, the aggregate collection in GST kept going down, and that is evidence to the fact that it was a hurried reform, not done as well as it should have. Um, Selvaraj, after COVID, what will happen to poverty? Selvaraj, the simple answer is poverty will go up. It will go up significantly. Naveen, how effective is trickle down concept in Indian context? There is enough literature on this now to show that trickle down by itself is not enough. Trickle down is good. Gains that are made on top of the pyramid definitely trickle down, but they trickle down very slowly. That is why we will take 500 years if we are just waiting for trickle down to get people out of poverty. The Prime Minister said that you have to be self-reliant, you have to take care of yourself. Atma Nirbharta, it is called. And people have begun to do that because they realize. And most of people like I'm very proud of all you teachers and so on who have encouraged their students to go out, to collect money, to distribute small things to people, face masks. A lot of you have done that. I know personally some of you who have been involved in this. And it is such a good thing that we have taught our students. I must congratulate all of you who did that and must encourage all of you to do it much more. How much time will it take for other countries? Ram, it is a very difficult, Ram Karthik, it's a very difficult to predict that. But usually in such a big debacle, historically we have seen that stability comes only after 5 or 6 quarters. So we are looking at stability in 2022 if something else doesn't go wrong. Srinivas Rao, who should wear a face covering? Everybody should, especially those who are infected. Definitely should wear. They should not go out. But if you are in the company of strangers, then it is best to keep face covered all the time. Usha, don't you think rich nations have higher occurrence only because of better testing? Very good point, Usha. They know that they have higher occurrence because of better testing, and that is why I get worried that if our numbers are high despite poor testing, then the reality is going to be very tragic. We don't know what is happening in Bihar or Bengal because of testing. Poverty is linked to self-production. If family must produce a useful and Tirthala Sai Kumar, good point. Is it possible by 2030? Well, your guess is as good as mine. How long India will take for achieving economic growth? Srinivasa Padmakar, very difficult to answer, but we have seen that countries come back very fast. If you see this, and some of you will know this answer better than me, all of you who are teaching history and political science, that countries like Japan, they face calamity after calamity, but they bounce back in no time. Take Japan, ravaged in the First World War, became a rich country immediately afterwards. Devastated in the Second World War, by the 1970 they were threatening the US. Ravaged by tsunami in 2002, again a big rich country. So some countries just come back very quickly. Uh, Kanak Chakravarti, is poverty related to population explosion? This used to be a old problem. It doesn't exist anymore because population in India is now fast coming down, and in South India we are already become negative growth. All South Indian states, Telangana, Karnataka, Kerala has been negative for a long time. So, but the only state that where population is increasing but very marginally is Bihar. The moment Bihar also gets right, then India will actually start growing negatively in population, and that is what we expect. By 2027, we expect that India's population will stop growing at 1.45 billion, and after about one generation, it will start going down. Um, yeah, Srinivas Padmakar has pointed out the Japan thing that I talked about. Thanks for saying that. Can you say in short the condition of our country in the next 2-3 years, Suyata? I expect that in the next 2-3 years we should bounce back. We should be back. Even if this year we grow at -5 or even -10%, I think in the next 2 or 3 years India's economic fundamentals are so strong that we should be back to 8 and 9% growth by 2023, unless we do another demonetization or something. So, Naveen, less than 3% paying direct tax, that is right. Indirect taxes seem to be the only alternative, but that is never a good idea to have to collect money from indirect taxes, because then you are taxing the poor. Population explosion, as I said, is there's nothing to do about it, except the only thing, Sai Kumar, I must tell you, is that population explosion always has a direct correlation with education level of women. So wherever women's education goes up, population starts coming down, and that's the reason why for population growing in Bihar and in Eastern UP. If you educate women there, nothing else works. You educate women, population will come down. It is an indictment of our education system that population explosion is what we are seeing. So I think I've covered questions that have been asked. If there are any more questions, I will be only too happy to answer them directly. Usha's question on does the SDG contradict capitalism? It does in a lot of ways. It gets internationalism in, it asks people to be sensitive, it asks people to be caring, and that is what I want to end my presentation with, by saying that as teachers, our responsibility is to make people sensitive and caring. All of you who are involved in this, and I know several of you are, in making people aware of what is happening around them. Those are the and to ensure the final point that I started off with also, and to ensure that our students become provide solutions. They look for solutions to all our problems. If we can encourage them to do that, then we are um, not failing in our duty as teachers. So thank you so much. It is always a great honor to address my colleagues in the teaching fraternity. We really have a big challenge in front of us. This year we will have to figure out how we are going to teach to our students online and so on. But given all that, given this situation, we as teachers have a huge responsibility in ensuring that India's problems get sorted out.